Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Urban Legends thread. Post your favorites or ones from your hometown.
When I was in Belize for an archaeology field school, the local family that stayed with us in camp told us about Tata Duende. We camp out in the middle of the jungle, about a 30-minute drive from the nearest town, and no phone service. Lights go out at 9 p.m., and then we are left in the dark, in our rooms, with only howler monkey noises to keep us company. I guess some people in camp said they thought they saw Tata Duende, a short goblin man, who has his feet turned the opposite way, toes to the back, heels to the front. They said they felt eyes just watching them, staring at them. The ladies in camp said Tata Duende has a habit of luring women out into the jungle. She never said if he kills them or just gets them lost. If you see Tata Duende's footprints, it might look as though he is walking away from you, but since his feet are backwards, he's really moving towards you. It freaked a few people out in camp so bad that they salted around their cabanas and had cleansing rituals in their rooms. Nothing ever happened.
Well, I've posted about this on X before, but in my rural hometown, a major gold mining town in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California, people believed in something similar to duende that were called TommyKnockers, or sometimes gnomes. The legends were said to be brought over by the Cornish people who came to work for the mining companies. Essentially, TommyKnockers were little people who would knock on the walls of the mine to warn miners of an impending cave-in. They would also borrow tools from the miners. The mining companies just thought the Cornish people were making excuses for their cowardice and laziness, since they often miraculously escaped tunnel collapses at the last second, and their tools often went missing. So strong was the belief in TommyKnockers, however, that my town voted in the 1950s to reopen a complex of sealed mining shafts due to the belief that the TommyKnockers had been trapped inside. There was no obvious ulterior motive for that vote, since mining wasn't restarted or anything like that. The reputation of the TommyKnockers was mainly mischievous, but they could also be malevolent if angered or insulted. At my house as a kid, we often attributed things going missing to TommyKnockers, and we would say, "thank you," out loud to them if we found the object again later. It was thought that if you weren't polite, they might start damaging your home with some poltergeist-like effects. I suppose part of the legend was that they had some kind of ability to become invisible, or shifted in and out of visibility. Supposedly they were visible to children, and my parents often recount stories of me interacting with what I called gnomes when I was a kid. I only sort of remember it, like it was a dream. It's kind of hard stuff to describe to people. I guess the most interesting part is that these Cornish legends seem to match up with local Native American legends of essentially the same thing.
I have a story that's pretty similar. I live in a small town next to a small mountain where they mined for iron ore. Legends say that gnomes live in the mountain. They used to live in natural caves and mined iron on their own. They also were pretty skilled blacksmiths and would sell all kinds of tools to the people in town. According to the legend, you had to go to one of the entrances and shout your order down the hole, like "I need a new plow." Then you would leave, and when you came back 3 days later, your tool would stand in the entrance. Then you would leave a payment you would see fit for the job and leave with your new tool. You would think that some people probably did not pay for their tools or just left like 1 coin or something, but there's actually another legend that shows how the gnomes dealt with bad customers. One guy, when he came back to get his new plow, would take a dump on the table you would usually place your payment on and turned around to leave. But his new plow suddenly caught fire and ran him over repeatedly, until he was dead.
This story is pretty old, but some people still believe in those gnomes. Nobody talks about them, But we have a pottery in town and they sell ceramic gnomes that you can place next to the old mine entrances as gifts for the gnomes. I don't know why they like ceramic versions of themselves so much, but people believe in this stuff. When you take a walk through the forest, you can see them sometimes. Not the real gnomes, just the ceramic ones. They also disappear after a while, but I guess that's more likely because of people stealing them for their own backyards than the gnomes accepting the gifts. While the first two stories I told are pretty official, I read them in school, and old, there are new stories that people made up in the last 100 years, probably. Some people say that the gnomes can make wishes come true or whatever. Other people believe that the gnomes are actually fairies, but I think those are either crazy new age people or just prefer fairies over ugly little gnomes and bend the legends to their taste. Oh, I forgot. While the human miners were down there, the gnomes would hide deep in the mountains, but at night they would make a mess of things and steal the miners' tools. I think they stopped once the miners left them food and other things. So, basically the gnomes never show themselves, but they get really angry if you are not nice to them. So, a pretty similar story to the TommyKnockers story.
The Helhorse from Denmark. Not an urban legend, folklore, hope it's alright. In Denmark, when a new church had to be built, an animal, sometimes a horse, was buried before the construction began. In case of the animal being a horse, one of its legs was chopped off and it was buried alive, so that it until the judgment day would be trapped between life and death. This horse would then haunt the local town, showing itself as a decaying body, sometimes without a head. Seeing it either meant that you were going to die, or you could die as a result of seeing it, which could happen if you walked outside a later night. You could hear the Helhorse before you could see it because it walked on 3 legs and the horseshoe on its 3rd hoof wasn't attached properly, giving off a distinct sound when walking. An example of a site where the Helhorse was well known was the Roskilde Cathedral. Inside the cathedral on the floor is a giant black gravestone without any inscriptions on. It is said a Helhorse is buried beneath and that in the night the Helhorse will rise from beneath the stone, and whoever might be inside the church when the Helhorse does this, may God have mercy on his soul. A story. A father was walking outside on late evening with his daughter. The father at a point finds his daughter looking back and he asks what's wrong. But Dad, didn't you even see the gray horse walking by? When they get home the daughter gets terribly sick and dies later. Another story, not entirely related. A man walks home alone one night. Upon finding a horse walking by itself, he climbs the horse for a ride home. The man tries to make the horse walk in the middle of the road, but instead it walks in the side of the road, so the man slaps the horse in its head, which causes its head to fall off. In terror he falls of the horse himself, but as he looks back on the horse, its head is now attached again, staring at the man.
1. I went to a small prep school for middle school and high school. The school's buildings dated back to the early 19th century. We didn't have a football team. The story goes that back in the early 20th century a football player's neck was broken in a game and he died. His girlfriend was a pianist who took her own life. The tech and theater kids used to claim they could hear piano music coming from the auditorium late at night. I went in there one night after a late club meeting and was walking around. I heard someone up on the stage. The lights were off, it was totally dark. I could hear someone padding back and forth on the stage. I walked the whole length of the stage, didn't hear a single door open or close, and eventually left. As I was walking away I heard the piano bench on stage creak. Yeah, nope. 2. I grew up in South Jersey. The Jersey Devil was the 13th son of some weird chick in the Pine Barrens. As teenagers we didn't have much to do but smoke weed and drive around looking for trouble. If you drive deep into the Pine Barrens like near ONG's Hat, which is a creepy ghost town named after a dude's hat, you're liable to find odd stuff. Abandoned wrecks in the sand. Bones in the scrub brush. We were unaware that the Pine Barrens is famed for its status as a dump site for bodies until much later. Once we came across an old, out-of-season Girl Scout camp. While we were walking around, we found a semi-permanent tent on the grounds that showed signs of recent occupation. There were liquor bottles, dead cigarettes, a sleeping bag, a lamp, and tons of old newspapers. I told everyone we had better leave. As we were walking back to the car, a fairly serious hike, we passed, hand to God, a dude in flannel with a creepy scraggly beard, his hands in his pockets, who made full-on eye contact with us for the whole time he was in sight. Motherfucker even turned around and walked backwards watching us. Needless to say, we noped hard out of there. 3. Broke into Byberry State Mental Hospital before they demolished it with some seniors when I was a freshman. They found an old grate on the bottom floor that had been pulled up and we had to wriggle in. They claimed they had been there before, but I found out later that was a lie, when we got lost. We ran into maybe 5 homeless people, none of whom were particularly happy to meet a bunch of well-fed yuppie children stumbling around their horrible nightmare squat. We did find a room full of what seemed like records and busted file cabinets. Lots of rooms had rusting bed frames and broken-out mirrors. I only found out later there was an urban legend that an axe murderer lived there and he liked to butcher young children, which, as Alice confided to me years later post-coitus, was sort of why we brought you, sorry. The face when you were bait for a murderer.
There are many from where I moved to and grew up from 13 to 19, small Portuguese town. 16,000 people? Sadly, I don't recall many. One is about skin changers, werewolves specifically, as some people would be found dead or report attacks by animals, and we all could hear howling in the distance. The problem is there are no real indigenous wolves, they are extinct in the area and many hundred kilometers around. No idea about veracity of it. I did however hear several howling at specific nights. It wasn't every night, just the ones that were most silent by default, low animal noise. I guess this is what allowed me to hear them in the first place. Another story is how the town has hundreds of underground tunnels. It has, that were built in the Middle Ages by the church. It would connect the castle to several points in town, including monasteries and churches. Some other tunnels were not linked with the castle. Of course, they are supposedly haunted. The known tunnels were sealed. I had one that linked to the house parents rented, not there right now so can't take pics, sorry. It is sealed as well. It would connect with the house across the street and supposedly to the tunnel network. I saw the entrance on the other house, also sealed. But, now and then people find new ones, generally very dangerous places due to age. A eerie/haunted places is the a hill in the borders of town. Slowly it grew towards it. It's called Hose Hill. In a rough translation, it is a place where about every month we would find someone dead, hanging, suicide most likely, very constant, and it is a favorite place for older/depressed people to commit suicide. Place is also favorite hangout for teens to have sex. I like the place myself, albeit sides are at the base of the hill and sexings are at the top. It has a gorgeous view of town. Another is of the serpent, some ghost mystical serpent that according to local tales always aroused when the town was in need, from natural disasters or invading armies. Also the serpent helped found the city in Roman times. It is said you can hear the serpent at night if you call for her, and guess what, you can, likely the wind howling through cracks/castle walls, but it sure resembles whispering/snake sounds, always unintelligible of course. I have visited the graveyard. It's gorgeous and very peaceful. I would read to the graves out loud. Hey, I was 16 to 18, we all have the goth phase. Besides, I did genuinely feel comfortable in there, albeit the graveyard also has some bad stories. That's how I started going there, due to curiosity. The one I can recall, out of several, was one of a group of guys, adults so around 30-ish, went there in a bet, and the bet was that they would have to nail a nail, derp, in the front gate while saying something. I think it was 2 or 3 people, no idea. They went there and the guy nailed the gate as he should, but without knowing he also nailed a bit of his clothing to it. or so is how the story goes. And when they were going away he felt something touch him, tried to run away but couldn't, was nailed, and died there for a heart attack. There are so many, typical of small towns, but my memory fails at it.
I live in the Appalachians, and we cover mirrors after somebody dies as well. It's because the dead spirits can get in through the mirrors. You have to put black veils over them and open windows to let the spirit out. Also, in my region, everybody paints the roof of their porches a bright sky blue color called paint blue. People believe that evil spirits can't cross bodies of water, and that a blue-colored roof to a porch is close enough to water to fool a spirit into thinking it can't come in. We also made lines of coarse salt around our doors and windowsills to keep the devil out when I was a little girl. My great-grandmother was involved in some borderline witchcraft activity. I don't know much, but this is what I've been told. A long time ago, my great-grandmother and her best friend were teenage brides. This was the Dust Bowl era in Appalachia, and it was very common to marry at 13 to 15 years back then. And they were involved in some kind of Celtic goddess cult activities because most people in Appalachia are descended from Irish Druids. Anyway, her and this girl were already married and pregnant teens who did Druid rituals in the woods together. They were best friends and traded their heirloom rings to each other. I kinda think it sounds like they were lesbians, but nobody in my family agrees with me. The whole witch thing was supposed to carry over on the female side of the family, and they did some ritual to make sure their babies were born as girls, and that their babies' babies were girls, etc. But they had to do it together or it wouldn't work right and would only have sons. Now Appalachia was going through a revival period at the time, meaning that primitive Baptist mentality, witch-burning type shit was a huge deal in these fringe Christian extremist, K groups. One of these guys caught wind that my great-grandma and her friend were doing witchy shit up in the woods, so he got his shotgun and got in his truck and blasted my great-grandma's best friend right through the stomach. He also killed her cow, which was the greater offense at the time, so a lynch mob gathered and they hung him from a tree. My great-grandma gave birth to my grandma, who went on to have 2 sons, my dad and his brother, and my dad had me and my brother. I'm a girl, but I'm a huge friend, so I don't know if it counts. I'm sorry it's a little disjointed sounding. I've had to piece the story together from multiple relatives over a long period of time. Apparently my grandma still has my great-grandma's best friend's ring somewhere.
Everyone knows Coachellafest, right? If you've ever come down here yourself, you probably came down heading south through the I-10 and noticed all these wind-powered turbines. Those got put there because the whole area is a pass where the wind blows through pretty much constantly. But did you notice all the abandoned cars on the side of the road? Well, maybe not, they get cleaned out just before the music festival. It'd be bad for tourism if everyone was spooked, right? Well, back before those whole area was settled, it wasn't full of wind generators, but wild cacti fields as far as the eye could see. The kind that bloom in the light of the full moon and takes years to grow a single fruit. The Native Americans in the area had a sort of rite of passage where one would go into the cacti field and collect some of the cactus fruit. Thing is, it was a rite of passage because it was dangerous. It was pretty easy to lose your sense of direction out there, especially at night. A lot of people have died out there, and the place is supposed to be haunted with the spirits of people who are still lost. And each lost soul added tries to bring in more people to help them find their way out, who in turn lose their way. So when you come down to the Coachella Valley and it's late at night, and you see someone flag you down on the I-10, take it from a local, just keep right on driving. Don't park your car and help them go look for their friend, or their kid, or anyone else who's out there. Just don't. Towing your abandoned car just costs us more taxes.
Anclote Road is a long, dark winding stretch with many sharp turns, that runs between the woods and the Anclote River. Many strange things are seen on this road late at night and sometimes even in broad daylight. People have reported seeing the Florida Bigfoot on this road and other strange things. One ghost that makes a habit of appearing on Anclote Road is a young girl with blonde hair, dressed in 80s-style clothes, shorts and a tube top. She is pretty when she shows up looking as she did before she died, but sometimes she shows up with all of her fatal injuries, appearing as a bloody mess. She sometimes acts as a hitchhiker, and at other times just walks along the road. This ghost is fast becoming somewhat of an urban legend in the area. She has been known to show up looking like a living person and talk to people. She also has a habit of following people home who she has interacted with. Myself and my daughter had seen this spirit on Anclote Road, and then a young man called us when she followed him home. From his description, we knew this was the same spirit, and that is how we were put into contact with this spirit. We have made contact with this spirit who claims to have been assaulted, beaten and then murdered, by 4 men. She also frequents a ranch where many people go to four-wheel, and had made contact with living people there who at first thought she was a real girl because she appeared so solid. This young lady used to hang out at a place known as the Moon, with her friends back in the early 80s, from what we have learned from EVP electronic voice phenomena, directly from her. That area is now the Anclote River Park Fishing Pier area. She goes by the name of Cindy, and she has been around since the mid-80s from what I have learned. We believe that her body was dumped in the woods near the power plant, possibly in quick mud.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.